January is a quiet month in the garden. The beds look empty, the soil feels cold, and most people believe there is nothing to do but wait. They tell themselves that gardening starts in spring, when the sun is warmer, the days are longer, and everything feels easier. Waiting feels safe. Waiting feels reasonable. But in reality, January is not empty at all. January is full of decisions. This is the month when the future of your garden is quietly decided, long before the first green leaf ever appears. While most people are waiting for the right time, experienced gardeners are already thinking ahead. Not with urgency, and not with pressure, but with calm intention. They understand that the work done now is invisible, yet powerful, shaping everything that will follow in the months ahead. Our grandparents understood this deeply. They didn't have shelves full of products or endless advice to follow. They didn't chase quick results or instant harvests. Instead, they worked with time rather than fighting against it. January was their planting season, their preparation season, and for some crops, their planting season. They trusted patience because they understood how nature rewards those who move early and gently. They knew something we often forget today. If you want food that lasts all year, you don't start when everyone else starts. You start earlier. You start quietly. You start when it feels like nothing is happening. That quiet beginning is what creates strength later, when the garden begins to demand more attention and energy. This video is not about rushing your garden or doing more work. It's about slowing down enough to see what truly matters. Because January isn't the beginning of the growing season. January is the beginning of the mindset. And the choices you make now will decide whether your garden struggles later or quietly feeds you month after month all year long. The most common mistake people make in January is believing that doing nothing is the safest choice. When the weather feels harsh and the garden looks lifeless, it's easy to assume that waiting is the responsible thing to do. Many gardeners tell themselves that they'll start once spring arrives, once the soil warms up, or once they feel more confident. Waiting feels like avoiding failure. But in gardening, waiting often creates it. January is not asking you to work harder. It's asking you to think differently. When you delay all decisions until spring, you compress months of preparation into a few rushed weeks. Seeds are started late, soil is unprepared, and small problems turn into large ones because there is no buffer of time. The garden begins the year already behind, and you spend the rest of the season trying to catch up. Another mistake is focusing only on what looks productive. People want visible growth, green leaves, and quick results. January offers none of that, so it feels unproductive by modern standards. But the most important work in a garden is often invisible. Strong roots form before leaves appear. Healthy systems are built long before harvest. Ignoring this quiet phase weakens everything that comes after it. There's also a mindset mistake hidden here. Many gardeners treat food as something that appears when they need it, rather than something that must be guided months in advance. This leads to dependence on last-minute solutions, store-bought starts, and reactive decisions. Over time, this creates stress, higher costs, and less control over what ends up on the table. January teaches a different lesson. It rewards those who act early, gently, and intentionally, not by forcing growth, but by respecting timing. When you understand this, you stop asking, "Is it too early?" and start asking, "What will my future self be thankful for?" That shift alone changes everything. This video is not just a list of 6 vegetables to plant in January. You can find lists anywhere. What really matters is understanding why these particular crops deserve your attention right now, when most gardens appear to be resting. Each one plays a specific role in building a garden that doesn't rely on perfect timing or constant effort later in the year. The 6 vegetables we're talking about today are not chosen because they grow fast or look impressive early on. They are chosen because they grow steadily, tolerate cooler conditions, and continue producing when other plants slow down. Together, they form a foundation rather than a shortcut. When planted with intention, they help spread your harvest across seasons instead of concentrating everything into a short window. This is about creating continuity. Instead of planting everything at once and harvesting all at once, these crops allow your garden to quietly carry you from early spring through summer, and in some cases well into fall. They reduce pressure later when heat, pests, and busy schedules make gardening harder. What you do now creates breathing room for the months ahead. More importantly, this approach changes your relationship with your garden. You stop reacting to problems and start designing systems. You stop asking how to get more food quickly and start asking how to get food consistently. That shift is what separates a stressful garden from a sustainable one. As we go through each of these 6 vegetables, don't just listen for planting dates or techniques. Pay attention to what each crop offers in the long term. Some give early harvests. Some offer resilience. Some provide steady production when others fail. Together, they show how January planting is less about fighting the season and more about working with it. Onions are one of the most underestimated crops in the garden, especially in January. Because they grow slowly and show very little progress at first, many gardeners overlook them in favor of faster plants. But this slow beginning is exactly what makes onions perfect for early planting. They use the quiet months to build strength underground, long before they are asked to produce anything visible. January is ideal for starting onions because they depend more on day length and temperature. By giving them a head start early in the year, you allow the plants to develop strong roots and healthy foliage before the longer days trigger bulb formation. When onions are planted late, they simply don't have enough time to mature properly, resulting in small bulbs and disappointing harvests. Another reason onions belong in a January garden is reliability. Once established, they require very little attention. They don't demand constant feeding, and they rarely suffer catastrophic failures when planted early. This makes them a low-stress crop that quietly does its job while you focus on other parts of the garden later in the season. Onions also offer long-term value beyond the harvest itself. When cured and stored correctly, they can last for months, sometimes well into winter. This means the work you do in January continues to pay off long after the growing season has ended. Few crops offer that kind of return on patience. Planting onions in January is not about speed. It's about commitment. You're choosing a crop that teaches you to think ahead, trust the process, and value results that take time. And once you experience the difference between early planted onions and rushed ones, it becomes clear why this humble vegetable earns its place at the very beginning of the year. Leeks are a crop that rewards patience more than almost any other vegetable. They take a long time to mature, and because of that, many gardeners never give them a chance. Starting leeks in January feels counterintuitive. They won't offer quick results, and for weeks they seem to do very little. But beneath the surface, leeks are steadily building the structure they need to carry them through the year. What makes leeks especially valuable is their tolerance for cold. Unlike many vegetables that struggle when temperatures drop, leeks continue growing slowly and consistently. This makes them an ideal bridge crop, filling the quiet gaps between seasons when other plants fail or stop producing. By planting them early, you allow them to establish deeply before the stress of heat or drought arrives. Leeks also fit naturally into a low-pressure garden system. They don't demand constant care, and they rarely need to be harvested all at once. You can leave them in the ground and pull them as needed, sometimes over several months. This flexibility turns your garden into a living pantry rather than a single harvest event. There is also a mindset lesson hidden in leeks. They teach you to think beyond quick wins and short seasons. While other crops come and go, leeks remain steady, standing quietly in the garden long after others have been removed. That kind of reliability is especially valuable in uncertain growing conditions. Planting leeks in January is a decision rooted in trust. Trust in time and slow growth, and in the idea that not all rewards need to arrive quickly. When you begin to value crops like leeks, your garden stops being a race and starts becoming a system that supports you, season after season. Tomatoes are the crop most gardeners build their entire season around, yet they are also the crop most often started too late. When tomatoes are planted in spring, they spend their early months simply trying to catch up. By the time they begin producing, the season is already half over. Starting tomatoes in January changes that equation completely. Tomatoes need time, not just warmth. They require weeks to develop strong roots, sturdy stems, and the internal structure that supports heavy fruiting later. When you start them early indoors, you're not rushing them. You're giving them space to grow without stress, so when they finally move outside, they are ready, not recovering. The difference shows up in timing, but also in volume. Early started tomatoes begin flowering sooner, set fruit earlier, and continue producing longer. Instead of a short burst of harvest in late summer, You get a steady supply across the entire warm season. That consistency matters more than sheer quantity, especially if you're trying to reduce reliance on store-bought food. There's also a psychological shift that happens when tomatoes are already growing in January. You stop thinking of gardening as something that starts in spring. The season has already begun. While others are waiting for frost dates, you're managing living plants that are already invested in the year ahead. Tomatoes represent momentum. They mark the point where winter planning turns into visible progress. Starting them in January isn't about impatience. It's about understanding that abundance is built quietly, weeks before it becomes obvious to everyone else. Cauliflower has a reputation for being difficult, and in many ways, that reputation is deserved. But the difficulty doesn't come from complexity. It comes from timing. Cauliflower is a plant that demands consistency, and January is where that consistency begins. Unlike faster-growing crops, cauliflower cannot tolerate interruptions. Any pause in growth, caused by cold shock, drought, or late planting, signals the plant to give up early. Instead of forming a large, dense head, it produces small, disappointing curds and never fully recovers. Starting cauliflower in January avoids this problem by allowing the plant to build strength long before outdoor conditions fluctuate. When cauliflower is given an early, protected start, it grows steadily and predictably. This steady growth is the secret most gardeners miss. They focus on fertilizers, varieties, or techniques, but the real factor is uninterrupted development. January planting gives cauliflower enough time to establish before it ever faces stress. Cauliflower also fills a crucial seasonal gap. It matures in early summer, a period when spring crops are finishing and summer vegetables haven't fully arrived. That makes it a bridge crop, quietly providing food when gardens often feel empty. In a self-sufficient system, these gaps matter. Choosing to grow cauliflower early is a choice to respect the plant's rhythm instead of fighting it. When you work with its need for stability, cauliflower becomes reliable rather than frustrating. And that reliability is what turns a challenging crop into a dependable part of a long-term food plan. Lettuce is often treated as a minor crop, something easy, fast, and replaceable. But when you plant lettuce in January, it becomes something very different. It becomes the first fresh food of the year, arriving at a moment when most people are still living off stored or imported vegetables. Winter lettuce grows slowly, but that slowness is an advantage. Instead of bolting or turning bitter, it develops steady, tender leaves that can be harvested over time. This turns a single planting into multiple meals rather than a one-time harvest. In a cold frame or unheated greenhouse, lettuce quietly grows through the darkest weeks, almost unnoticed, until suddenly it's ready. What lettuce provides is not just calories, but freshness. After months of heavier foods, the body responds to crisp greens in a way that's hard to ignore. This makes lettuce psychologically important as well as nutritionally valuable. It signals that the growing season has truly begun. Lettuce also teaches restraint. You don't pull the whole plant at once. You take what you need and allow the rest to continue growing. That approach mirrors the kind of relationship this video is really encouraging, one where the garden is a continuous source, not something you strip all at once. By planting lettuce in January, you shorten the distance between winter and spring. You create a moment of renewal long before the landscape changes, and that early freshness helps carry you into the rest of the season with energy and intention. Celery is not a crop for impulsive gardeners. It demands planning, patience, and consistency from the very beginning. That is why January matters so much. Celery needs one of the longest growing seasons of any common vegetable, and without an early start, it never truly reaches its potential. Many people struggle with celery because they underestimate its nature. Celery is essentially a water-loving plant that thrives only when moisture and nutrients are steady. Miss a watering, let the soil dry out, or rush its early growth, and the plant responds with bitterness and stringy stalks. Starting celery in January gives you the time needed to establish strong roots before outdoor conditions become unpredictable. When grown properly, celery rewards that effort with months of harvest. Instead of cutting the entire plant at once, you can harvest individual stalks as needed, allowing the plant to continue producing. This makes celery another example of a living food reserve rather than a single harvest crop. Celery also represents discipline in the garden. It forces you to commit to regular care, but it does not require constant intervention. When the foundation is set early, the plant largely takes care of itself. That balance between attention and restraint is at the heart of productive gardening. Planting celery in January is not about convenience. It's about choosing crops that align with long-term thinking. When you succeed with celery, you prove that your garden isn't just reacting to the season, it's prepared for it. Peppers teach one of the most important lessons in gardening. Some crops fail not because of poor care, but because they are started too late. Peppers are slow by nature. They germinate slowly, grow slowly, and take their time before setting fruit. January is not early for peppers, it's necessary. When peppers are started late, they spend much of the season simply trying to survive. Cool soil, fluctuating temperatures, and short days keep them stalled, and by the time they finally begin producing, the season is already closing. Starting peppers in January changes their entire trajectory. It gives them the long, steady buildup they need before heat arrives. Peppers also demand respect for warmth. They are tropical plants, sensitive to cold in a way tomatoes are not. Exposing them to low temperatures too early can set them back for weeks. By starting them indoors in January, you control their environment during the most vulnerable stage of growth, allowing them to develop strength without stress. The reward for that patience is longevity. Well-started pepper plants produce steadily from midsummer until the first frost. Instead of a short harvest window, you get months of fresh peppers, plus enough surplus to preserve for winter. That extended production makes peppers a cornerstone crop in any serious garden. Growing peppers successfully isn't about tricks or shortcuts. It's about acknowledging how much time they need and giving it to them up front. January planting isn't rushing the process. It's honoring it. Eggplant is a crop that reveals very quickly whether a gardener planned ahead or simply reacted to the season. It is even slower and more heat-loving than peppers, and without an early start, it often fails to produce meaningfully before fall arrives. January is where success with eggplant truly begins. Eggplant does not forgive cold soil or rushed planting. When started late, it spends most of the summer recovering instead of producing. But when given a long, protected start indoors, it develops thick stems, deep roots, and the resilience needed to handle outdoor conditions once heat becomes consistent. This crop also teaches the value of stability. Eggplant thrives when moisture, temperature, and nutrients remain steady. Fluctuations slow it down, and slowdowns directly reduce yields. By starting eggplant in January, you remove early season instability from the equation, allowing the plant to enter summer fully prepared. While eggplant may not produce the sheer volume of tomatoes or peppers, its contribution is still significant. A small number of healthy plants can supply steady harvest throughout the warm months, providing fruit that stores well and fits naturally into preserved and cooked meals. Eggplant is not a beginner's shortcut crop. It's a confirmation crop. When eggplant performs well, it means the system is working. And that system always begins earlier than most people expect, quietly, in January. This is where gardening quietly splits into two very different paths. On one side are gardeners who wait for warmth, planting only when conditions feel comfortable. On the other are those who work with the season as it is, not as they wish it to be. Cold hardy crops belong to the second group, and they mark the point where gardening becomes serious. These crops don't demand ideal conditions. They tolerate cold soil, short days, and slow growth. Instead of racing toward quick harvests, they establish themselves patiently, using winter and early spring to build strength. By the time warmth arrives, they're already rooted, already growing, already ahead. Cold hardy crops also change how you think about risk. While warm season plants depend on perfect timing and weather, cold-tolerant plants reduce uncertainty. They grow when little else will, providing food during the most fragile part of the year. This reliability is what transforms a garden from a hobby into a food system. There is a quiet confidence that comes with growing through cold. You stop fearing setbacks because the plants are built to handle them. Frost becomes a condition, not a threat. Slow growth becomes progress, not failure. This stage of the garden isn't about abundance yet. It's about stability. And stability is the foundation of self-sufficiency. Once you understand cold hardy crops, January stops feeling early. It starts feeling right. At this point, it becomes clear that this video was never really about individual crops. Onions, leeks, tomatoes, lettuce, and celery are not valuable on their own. Their real power appears only when they work together as a system that produces food steadily instead of all at once, and one that adapts across seasons rather than depending on perfect timing. Most gardening advice focuses on seeds, varieties, and techniques. But seeds don't fail gardens. Systems do. When crops are chosen and started with intention, each one fills a different role. Some store well, some grow slowly through cold, some provide early freshness, and others carry production through summer. Together, they reduce gaps, smooth risk, and create continuity. This is why January matters so much. Not because of what you plant, but because of how early decisions shape the entire year. Starting seeds in January is a commitment to the long view. It's a recognition that food security is built quietly, long before harvests become visible. When your garden becomes a system, dependence decreases naturally. You're not reacting to shortages or prices. You're planning ahead, building resilience into the soil, the calendar, and your daily meals. The garden stops being a seasonal activity and becomes part of how you live. This is the difference between growing plants and growing food. And once you see it, January is no longer a waiting room. It's the starting line.